Welcome back. How was the tornado chasing?
It was exciting, thrilling, nerve-wracking, scary, and fun all in the same week. I'll have to show some pictures. We got 4 tornadoes and a lot of wind and a lot of hail.
That was in the Texas area, right?
Yeah, Texas, Oklahoma, and a little bit of Kansas, but mostly Texas. It was fun, as always. A little scary, but still fun.
As if the storms in the AI world is not enough, Jamie, you're chasing more actually out there. Tornado chasing, as everybody knows, Jamie is a storm chaser, as the title says. But he's back home now, and we are doing this episode. There are tons of changes in the AI world as well. We'll talk about how some of the new launches have happened this week, including some of the changes around the Phi models from Microsoft, which now includes the reasoning abilities.
Yeah, and we'll also get into a little bit around Google Gemini and their inclusion of their editing tool inside of the Gemini UI. And also, we'll get a little bit into Claude's new capabilities in terms of integrations, what that means, what it means as far as advanced research as well. And there are some implications or at least ties to MCP servers. So we'll touch upon that as well.
Yeah, and we'll talk about some of the altercation that happened between Anthropic and Nvidia and a lot more. Stay tuned. Greetings. Welcome to the AI Files podcast. If you're looking to stay up to date on the AI, this is the podcast for you. I'm Shadab Hussain. I'm the director of AI at Microsoft, and I'm your co-host.
Hello, everybody. Jamie Basilico, as you know already. I'm the other co-host here for the AI Files. My day job is a data and AI technical specialist and architect. And as a reminder, please note this is not an official Microsoft channel, so the views and opinions expressed by myself and Shadab are our own and do not represent the views of Microsoft.
Let's talk about the quote of the week. Let me start with this. Quote, American firms should focus on innovation and rise to the challenge rather than tell tall tales that large, heavy, and sensitive electronics are somehow smuggled in baby bumps or alongside live lobsters. Unquote. This was told by actually the spokesperson for Nvidia in reference to Anthropic's claims of how these AI chips are being smuggled into countries targeted by the US controls, like China. Let's step back and let's give the context of what happened really between. There was some kind of a bickering between Anthropic and Nvidia this week, actually, about the sanctions control. And there is definitely a conflict of interest out there because Chinese companies developing the better models, of course, makes Anthropics insecure, because they can beat those models. But on the other hand, it also hurts Nvidia's business, right? Billions of dollars of export now that cannot happen. So export controls, of course, are not in the interest of Nvidia as well. So of course, they expectedly they are actually, like having a difference of opinion there. What happened was actually it started with on Wednesday, Anthropic, they came out with its support for the US Department of Commerce framework for artificial intelligence diffusion, which actually is expected to impose a lot of export restrictions on AI chips starting May 15. And this is reference to the diffusion rule, which was published in January 2025. It actually created three different tiers of the export controls. The tier one includes the close allies with, pretty much no restrictions or very few. And then tier two includes other countries with some limits, a lot of friendly countries as well, famously India and Israel. And then tier three includes adversarial nations with strict controls, which of course includes China. Now, what Anthropic is talking about is that look, the compute advantage is critical, and US currently leads in this advanced semiconductor technology. But if we continue to give that export out to the other countries, they actually catch up. But because of the export control, the China's progress is slowed, and this efficiency, because what happens is that this latest chips are becoming more and more efficient, right? So every 2 years, the computing power is doubling. Now, if you control these exports, what happens is that it takes much longer and is much more expensive using the older chips to train those AI models. And they're talking about that this efficiency gap will keep China behind, and that progress is slowing in terms of the catching up. They also talk about, and the example of DeepSeek that shows the controls work, because DeepSeek had a lot of constraint in actually training the models, and they also talked about it, that how it was difficult with those export controls. They also talk about that America should kind of cement that infrastructure lead, and like bring some more manufacturing domestically as well. The chip should be designed by American firms and also manufactured by them. And then finally, they also talk about the chip smuggling is a major threat, right? It happens. So given all of these, which they define as a problem statement and goals, they actually came up with three recommendations. Number one is that, okay, adjust the tiering system where you can allow the countries in tier two who have more robust data center security to actually obtain more chips through the government to government agreements, rather than just putting that all together in one tier. And the second recommendation was that, okay, reduce this no license compute threshold. So what happens is that for tier two countries, if the total amount of the chip that you're requiring is 1700 Nvidia H100, for example, it doesn't need a government permission, and that's roughly about $40 million worth of technology. So they're saying that, however, people can take advantage of it. There could be multiple smaller purchase that stays under the radar, so it doesn't really serve the purpose. You should actually reduce that limit that you allow. It should not be 1700 Nvidia H100 chips or the equivalent. And the third recommendation they are saying is, that increase that funding for export enforcement, because export controls will only work if there is an enforcement, and currently they are not being enforced appropriately. So there should be more enhanced resources for the different federal agencies to make sure that it is controlled and enforced. Um, and of course, now you can imagine that why it actually hurts Nvidia's prospects. Of course, it also secure Anthropic's prospect, because they will have lesser, I would say, competition from the China. So that's what happened actually this week. We'll see what will happen. May 15th, new executive orders may come up on this export control. There have been pros and cons of those export control. There have been critics. There have been supporters. We'll see where the tides turn.
So basically, if I net it down, you've got Anthropic, who wants tighter controls, even further than what is already in that the January 2025 tiering rules, and Nvidia wants them loosened for obvious reasons. Is that netting it down from?
Absolutely, it's very simple. It's down to the basic needs of business prospects. Simple for both of them.
Yeah, makes sense. That's
Okay.
interesting. I mean, yeah, it's. I do believe there needs to be controls, because we don't want technology leaking, or other organizations, countries taking advantage of technology that's not necessarily rightfully theirs. But at the same token, you can have things so stringent that it stifles our own innovation and ability to sell. So I could see both sides.
That is true. I mean, and the other side of this is, the Jimmy, that it's really hard, right? I mean, tariff is a great example of realizing that the supply chains and the business and the economy are so interrelated and intertwined now. It's really hard to do something in isolation, right? So the chip itself, right? We may be designing but not manufacturing everything, right? Supply chain, right? So if there could be export control on the chips, what if there are export control on the ingredients, or the parts, right? Or the raw materials, right? If the other countries who export they can also do things like that. So I believe that this is a much complex issue. It is not an easy, otherwise it would be much effectively done. Honestly, I think this is way nuanced. And the other thing is that DeepSeek, in my view, is not a great example of why export control work. It actually only means that they were just going to become more innovative, right? They will just figure out. They went down actually to the level of the chip rewiring, right, to get things done. Now there are countries, of course, some of these export restrictions, it will break their back. They have no resources to actually really counter these. They cannot, right? They don't have enough firepower. But like Jensen Huang said, right, China is actually not behind. They're actually right behind us. That was the other thing that he also mentioned. He came back from a trip from China, and he said that 50% of AI researchers in the world today are from China. So it's not a country that like you can simply suppress by not providing the chip. They will figure out a way. So that's unfortunately the reality is, and we'll see where the things go.
Hmm. Time will tell.
Yeah,
Anyway,
exactly.
I know there's more news out there. So what do you got for us?
Yes, I mean, like a bunch of things actually were happening this week. ChatGPT, it tries to become people pleaser, and in process, it become more, I would say, sycophanty, right? And like okay, we're just trying to basically please people now, and trying to be more agreeable with people. Now, the problem was that the people actually use the ChatGPT to also find not just like a person who basically is just agreeing. People wanted to disagree more and give it more ideas, right? And that's where the value lies. So this upgrade wasn't really welcomed, and it was rolled back. So Sam Altman did talk about it, yeah, that it's being agreeable is not being helpful, and like really in the sense. So they have actually rolled back this update, and then go back to the usual ways where you will disagree, the model will disagree with you, and then give you more suggestions, things like that. So that's what actually happened. In fact, this is a fine balance, right? I mean, the companies have been trying to, like OpenAI, Claude, and others, and everybody has been trying to develop some sort of personality to these models. The problem is that the people also come in different personalities. Some of them may not like a model which is like independent thinking. Some of them may like just a yes man, right? So it's hard to say. Maybe they should provide these different options that, okay, I want more agreeable, right? I think it should become more of a setting so that people can tweak according to their own personality, to be honest,
Yeah,
rather than making
yeah,
generic update.
yeah. I was just thinking the same thing. I mean, I remember when OpenAI first came out, and I believe it might have even been through Copilot, where you can specify how you wanted the model to act, like funny or professional or somewhere in the middle. I mean, that's obviously just changing parts of the system message, but maybe as you just said, there should be options like how do you want the model to behave even further along these lines of do you want it to be sympathetic? So I think that probably will be or should be an option to change your version of the model. And these things can be done today. I mean, creating GPTs is a form of that, and that's been out for a while. Obviously, this took it to the next level in terms of the whole model, but there's nothing that says you can't do that if you wanted to personalize your own interaction or the type of responses you get back.
Very true, very true. I think that is where it's really headed. It depends, right? I mean, not just personality. It's also sometimes mental, like health levels and moods, etc. A lot of things can determine, because even that requirement can change, right? Depending on the mood, people may want different kind of agreeability.
Yep.
Um, okay, we last week, Jamie, we actually talked about the a new, I would say, AI app that was Cluely, and it basically, what it does, it helps you cheat, right? So cheating is becoming legit business now. There is uh, there is a counter Cluely actually business also. It's called Truly. So, and this Truly business is basically by a company called Validia, and they are providing this as an app to actually detect if you have a Cluely, because Cluely claim that they are undetectable, and by downloading Truly, you can actually detect if the other person is using the Cluely. So it's a very funny name, a good take on that. And then essentially, there is always going to be a these kind of I would say de- anti-detection and detection and all those kind of apps. Now, funny thing is this, right? Cluely also says that, okay, we were anyway working on even the other ways, like going down at the hardware level or at the lenses or the glasses and things like that, where you can't even detect these things. So they are basically going to continue to find the ways in which they can remain undetectable and help people cheat. And of course, on the other hand, that other organizations, like, they will also actually try to detect, right? It's a, I would say, very amusing fight.
Yeah, it's a back and forth, and I still go back to, well, what is really cheating? I don't really see this as cheating. I see it as a way of life that will be more and more interwoven into the things that we do over time by using these AI things. So I kind of think this one's a little silly, but you'll have these folks or people that try to persuade others to say, use of AI, let's use another tool on top of it. But anyway, that's my own personal belief.
Yeah. Another funny update came from actually Perplexity. That's called Fact Check Your Debt. Basically, we receive a lot of messages on the WhatsApp. Now, I know that WhatsApp is not as popular within US as it is in the international market, and Mark Zuckerberg admits that. But in the international market, I can tell you that WhatsApp is essentially, a lot of businesses happen on the WhatsApp, and people use it for everyday communication, which also means that a lot of I would say, spurious, hateful comments and forward, etc., that happens. Rumors start, right? I mean, the riots happen because of those things. Actually, it goes down to pretty bad levels. That's also generally a critic of the Meta group, that they don't do enough to control those things. So anyway, the Perplexity actually came out. Now you can actually access Perplexity. There is a number. You can add that as a contact, and then you can basically send a message to that number, as just like you would do a WhatsApp contact. You can ask it about any answer. Like, for example, I asked it, okay, tell me the news of the day today, and it showed me that actually the news of the day, and it can send you the links and things like that. So just like you would use a Meta AI, for example, as an assistant in the WhatsApp. Perplexity, of course, provide, and it's free, so you could use it directly. I tried it, and it was pretty good. But you can also, what you can do is, let's say if you receive a forwarded message, right, or if you receive a message, you can forward that to this contact, Perplexity, on your WhatsApp, and ask it to fact check. And then it will probably take a few seconds. I tried it with one of the message. In fact, it was about I think there was a image going around, Jamie. This was actually about Trump in a pope kind of dress, right, with a gesture. um, and I asked it to fact check, because it didn't look correct. So it came back. It said that, nah, this gesture is this is a standard PayPal gesture, etc., things like that. But it did not tell me that it is a fake image. Okay, that was interesting. And later I learned that actually it's a AI generated image, but it is actually shared by Trump, as a funny thing, right? So it is not entirely like a completely, I would say, fake, in a way that it was shared by, like, created by somebody else, but it was actually um, shared, although it is AI generated. So like, I would say, I don't know how much, I haven't tried it a lot, but it's an interesting service to actually fact check. We do receive many times these kind of thing, and I often go back to the people, hey, this doesn't sound right, don't spread this. I will continue to test this out.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. The name sounds a little strange, but I like the idea of being able to, you know, do instant fact checks against things, because we're going to see more and more, whether it's deep fakes on images or quote unquote articles that come out, or some misrepresented. I was going to say misrepresented facts, but misrepresented information. So it would be great to have, built-in tools. And I do use WhatsApp, so familiar with the tool and the platform. So it's great to see something, whether it's by Perplexity or somebody else. I think it's a good idea.
And by the way, the name, actually, you asked it, the why the name is, I can fully understand the context, because as I say, right, it is used a lot in the international market, particularly in India. WhatsApp is a huge thing. Okay, a lot of business happens actually on the WhatsApp. You can, for example, order a taxi and things like that using the WhatsApp. So it's highly popular there. And the thing is that people use like, like for example, there are a lot of forwards that come from uncles and aunties and the old relatives, and they often actually forward a lot of fake content. So that's why it is actually fact check your dad, because this is basically referring, it should be more like fact check your relatives, because that's what generally happens a lot in
Yeah,
India context.
it's funny.
Okay. And one more thing, there was the news actually going around, Jamie. This was about Apple and Anthropic. They are partnering to build an AI coding platform. And this is actually kind of a vibe coding platform. It is being developed right now for Apple to use internally, to, essentially like to write, edit, and test code for programmers. And this was reported by Bloomberg. Now, they are actually planning to roll this out only internally, but it might be, who knows, right? It might be actually offered externally as well. And it's part of a new version of Apple's programming software called Xcode. And it will be using the Claude Sonnet model. So that's what the news is. We don't know exactly. It is not like an official announcement, but this news was going around.
I didn't even know Apple had a programming platform. I mean, obviously they have things to build apps for iPhone and the Mac, but this one struck me as perplexing. No pun intended, but perplexity before. But seeing Apple line up with Anthropic on this, it was just a little baffling to me. But we'll see where it goes. I mean, Apple certainly has a lot of people behind them and developers for, like I said, the iPhone, but this one was just strange in my opinion.
Yeah, and in fact, Apple is trying to find ways to work with pretty much all the, like, they already have this tie-up with OpenAI on the phone. They're trying to use Gemini as well as an alternative, and now they're trying to find a ways to actually work with the Anthropic as well. So Apple is like, okay, I just want to work with everybody, probably except Microsoft.
Yeah, I was about to say almost Switzerland, right? Um,
Yeah, I mean,
Speaking of Gemini, it's a great segue in terms of Gemini potentially with Apple, which I did read something about that this past week. But Google with Gemini actually just released the ability to do their image editing inside of the Gemini chatbot. So this is something that could be done originally with the imaging tools that they have, which is their latest image-based model, but just in the same way that OpenAI introduced their latest image model into ChatGPT, Gemini is doing the same thing, or Google's doing the same thing through the Gemini chatbot. So much like what OpenAI released, is this imaging capability allows to not only create very realistic looking images, but also modify them. And you could modify or update the images based upon what you want it to do. You could also upload images from your device as well that will enable you to modify or edit that image. So what you see here is one of the things that's up on Google's site. So once you start reading it again, look at our show notes for this. But you can upload an image of your dog, put a hat on your dog, and say change the background to be a beach. I mean, that's an example. Granted, yes, it's very simplistic and simple, but you get the idea and notion that you can change things directly. And the one thing that I even at this, yes, changing the background is interesting, but it still keeps the characteristics in the physical world. Because if you notice there's shadows with the dog on the grass, it kept those same shadows on the beach. So relative to where the sun direction was hitting the dog, it still kept that. So to me, it's little things like that that maybe you didn't pick up on initially, even with that simple thing, but it's able to do that. And the way it does it, Gemini actually offers this multi-step editing process or flow, and it provides these richer capabilities of contextual based editing off of how you want that thing to change. So again, you could change backgrounds, you could replace objects, you could change and or add different elements into there, plus a whole lot more. And as I mentioned already, and you see this in this very simple example, is that you could upload your own images. So you don't have to start with, hey, create me a picture of a dog on a beach. You could just say, here's my dog. change the background from my backyard setting to a beach setting. The one thing that I think is interesting with what Google is doing and others in the same notion is there certainly could be deep fakes that are created. So what Google will do is that any image that's created through the chatbot using the image in, there will be a watermark put on it. So it's going to be invisible to you or I unless you have the tools that will show the watermark. So this will ensure that anything that's being created, people can validate and verify that, oh, this is a real image versus a AI based image that was created through the Google or Gemini platform. One other thing too, obviously this is already out there, as I mentioned before, Google's AI Studio platform. This is where you can create these images directly, but this is the first time it's included within their chatbot app.
Hmm. This invisible watermark, Jamie, I was thinking that, just like that Cluely example, can these invisible watermark be removed? I mean, somebody can always create some sort of an hacking app where you can take these apps and images and remove the watermarks as well. Is that possible? Or I don't know how sticky they are.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that. That's a great question we can follow up on, but I would assume that there's like interlacing going on within the image, and it might be, I don't want to say nothing is foolproof, but I would believe it would be difficult to actually remove the watermark. But I wouldn't put that past anybody as a challenge to be able to remove it. But I would think it's fairly stringent or fairly strong in terms of how it's interwoven into the image.
Hmm. Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, likewise.
Okay. All right. So I think let's talk about a little bit about some of the news from Claude. And, you know, there are a couple of things that Anthropic announced this week. They talked about something called integrations. As a quick recap, Anthropic came out with a model context protocol end of the year. Last year, it became hugely popular, and now like OpenAI is even supporting. Microsoft support that in the agent service. Even Google actually, Sundar Pichai actually did a poll that to MC or to not. Right, let me know. So more likely they will also actually come out with the support to MCP. So it has become hugely popular, and the way it really works is that you have a kind of a host application, which could be a, let's say, a cursor, or it could be a Claude desktop or things like that, and then you create basically a client, which basically then go to the server and get the whatever like action or the data, etc. back. um, the server, the MCP server, is hosted. Like it could be hosted by anybody. Like any provider can actually create that server. Now, in the Claude desktop application, however, which acted like as a host, it could only take the local, the basically locally created MCP. So that was a limitation. What they've done is they've actually now come up with these called integrations, which are basically they're like 10 popular services like Atlassian, Jira, Confluence, Zapier, Cloudflare, things like that, right? The common software service provider who actually has their own MCP servers. And this Cloud Desktop now has these pre-built integrations available. So you can actually use that to establish those essentially a connection, right? So you don't have to do it yourself. It is already now pre-built available within the Cloud Desktop. It just makes it easier for anybody who's using the Cloud Desktop. And you can, and they will be adding more, right? I mean, there'll be more and more that will be added. So they're just making it easier for people who are using Cloud to actually use those integrations. These integrations can also be used when, for example, in Claude, when you're using it and you're trying to do, let's say, advanced research. When you're doing, and they already added the research capabilities, which actually can go out to the web and like do the research. Now it can also make use of those integrations, right? So it can also go out and use those integrations that you have established with these like 10 and 12, whatever the providers are today. It can be also used. By the way, they also actually up their research capability, right? So now they have added like basically advanced research capabilities, it has been expanded to conduct more complex investigations, which could be like across hundreds of internal and external sources. And it can go up to 45 minutes for doing all these kind of complex investigations and advanced research. Generally, the reports takes 5 to 15 minutes, but it can go all the way up to 45 minutes, and it will itself decide how long it has to go, right? um, to use the research, however, you have to just make sure that you're using, there is a toggle button in the Claude app, where you have to actually just toggle it on so that it can go and do that research. It is similar to what is in the chat GPT right now. And the other thing is that they also actually add the basically the research with support for web search and Google Workspace, and now with integrations as well. So they have essentially expanded the scope of the research as well. This is actually already out, available now in the beta access, to Max, Team, and Enterprise plans. Max is a new plan that actually added, which is equivalent to, what is that? I
Pro.
think Pro
Yeah.
plan, right?
Yep.
$200 a month. And so it's already actually now available for those who have those subscriptions to use.
Yeah, so to me, the news from Anthropic this week is big to me, at least on the integration side. If anyone has tried to use MCP, you know that there's a lot that you have to integrate on your own between the quote unquote server and then the client side. You also have to be very careful about security for doing the model context protocol. So what I'd like about this integration is that, number one, you can connect into remote MCP servers and do that in a very efficient way through the integrations. But more importantly, maybe this is two parts. One, the ability to actually use security through OAuth, through Cloudflare, is super important. Again, you don't have to worry about all those security constructs that you would have to develop on your own through just using plain old vanilla MCP. So that's important because, yeah, I could send up an MCP server and client pretty quickly, but just as quickly as I could do that, I guarantee you it could be hacked just as quickly because you don't have the right security posture or position inside of your MCP configuration. The other thing that I think is super important here is, while there's only 10 services that are within the integration capability today, even out of those 10, if you use something like Zapier, you can connect into thousands of other tools and platforms. So something like using Zapier, it actually just is going to help in what you're using or connecting through this quote unquote integrations piece. So that's kind of what I see as super interesting about integrations.
True. I think, and as you said, right, about the security, I think those are very valid concern. Not just somebody can hack into this. The malicious providers can actually create the MCP server and then, like it's kind of do some sort of prompt injection attack, jailbreak, and things like that, right? In the guise of genuine MCP server, right? So, you have to be very careful who you are connecting. Make sure that you're connecting to the, genuine, authentic MCPs, and make sure that you're giving the right permissions when Claude is asking you to connect. And there is a lot of those protection that you have to take care.
Yep. So let's get into some other news. We just talked about Google. Let's talk about Amazon. So Amazon released a new model. It's actually, it's new, but it's still within the premise of their Nova. But they had talked about releasing Premiere, which is now released. So what is Premiere? It's basically the Premiere model from the Amazon Nova family of models. So this is their top model, which means it can handle obviously multimodal, whether it's text, images, or videos. It's got a very high context length, pretty much in line with everybody else today, which is 1 million tokens. Certainly has the best performance out of the models within Nova, and you can see that on on the right-hand side here. It's not earth-shattering. When you look at the benchmarks, you're not like, wow, blown away by this, but it's in the class of what I'll call others, a percentage point here or there. So it's a very high-performing model. What it does do very well, it does very well at things that need deep understanding, multi-step type processes. So what I think about where Premiere fits It's in building very sophisticated agents or being that quote unquote planner agent that would spin off to maybe less capable models for doing, what I'll call routine tasks. So, as I mentioned before, the benchmarks, it's been evaluated across 17 different benchmarks. Again, proving that this is a very capable model compared to some of the other models in the industry. So, what's also very interesting about this model is the ability for it to do distillation. So, um, we talked about distillation before. The DeepSeek models were um, using distillation to create other what I'll call smaller base models off of that. So same thing here. You can create very highly capable models that are cost effective and have low latency associated with them with smaller models like the Nova Pro, Lite, or Micro. So they're using Premiere to build those other smaller models. And there's an example that Amazon actually puts out there where they did a distillation for Nova Pro where they were using it for tool selection API calling and actually had a 20% higher accuracy rate based upon that distillation from Premiere. As I mentioned already, use cases around multi-agent collaboration could also be used in workflows and how do I actually build that out. The customer feedback so far has been pretty good. Early customers like Slack, Robinhood, Snorkel AI have all praised the capabilities within Nova Premier, for its performance, cost effectiveness, and just the ability to build AI-based applications. Availability, this is not everywhere just yet. So it's available in Amazon Bedrock in the East US, which is North Virginia, and US East, which is based in Ohio, and US West region. So really just three regions for now. And I'm sure that'll roll out into even more. So
Awesome.
what other model news? And I know there's a couple of things with Microsoft and Azure related to models that Microsoft put out.
Of course, models, models, and models. We just need more models, Jamie. We don't have
Yeah.
enough. So Microsoft actually, as part of their, the 50th anniversary that happened recently, they also actually launched some new models. And just this week, they announced the Phi-4 Reasoning models. So now reasoning has been added as a capability in the Phi-4 models, Phi-4 family of models, which was also recently announced. This model, Phi-4 Reasoning, so there are three models. There is a Phi-4 Reasoning, Phi-4 Reasoning Plus, and there is a Phi-4 Mini Reasoning. Let's talk about Phi-4 Reasoning. Phi-4 Reasoning is a 14 billion, 14 billion parameter open weight reasoning model, and it has been trained using the supervised fine tuning of Phi-4 with high quality reasoning demonstrations on a data set of chain of thought traces, right? So all these traces of chain of thought that has been captured, and then it has been trained via a supervised fine tuning. Okay, and it really does a really good job. It takes a little bit longer time, of course, like other reasoning models, and then it generates detailed reasoning. And since it has been trained with the supervised like training set and chain of thought traces, it is now capable of doing the reasoning, and it outperforms larger models like OpenAI O1 Mini, right, or the DeepSeek R1 Distill Llama 70 billion parameters. So just remember, 14 billion parameters model is able to now outperform the DeepSeek R1 Distill Llama 70 billion, which is basically a model which has been used, trained using the distillation from DeepSeek R1. And it achieves pretty good performance on benchmarks like AIME 2025. So, that's the quality of small language model. They are basically curated with synthetic data training, very high quality data, even though they are tiny, but they're mighty because of their high data quality used in the training, etc. Now, there is a Phi-4 Reasoning Plus model version as well, which is basically the same model with the same number of parameters, but it has been enhanced with even the reinforcement learning for the higher accuracy. So it utilizes actually 1.5 times more tokens for the improved performance, but it performs better than the reasoning model, just a reasoning model. It beats the DeepSeek R1 Distill Llama, beats the O1 Mini, and it even actually achieves a performance similar to the full DeepSeek R1 model, which is like 671 billion parameters, right? So goes way beyond the capability of even the Phi-4 reasoning model. Pretty good. These models are actually, of course, because they're small language model, they can be used in very small setting. They can be used on the edge. And now with the reasoning model, I'm not sure, Jamie, but I believe they are one of the few, or maybe the only family of small language models who have now the reasoning capability. Um, I may be wrong if some other family, but there are not many small language models who have the reasoning capabilities as well. So this is a big capability enhancement for the small language model family, I think.
Yeah, it's not only the capability, but also the price performance of that and what it could run on, and the capabilities that you get for the cost of running it. And I think that's important as well.
Absolutely. In fact, there is a smaller version as well, right, which is even smaller. There's a Phi-4 mini reasoning, which is actually much a smaller version, which is 3.8 billion parameters only. It's a compact model. It's optimized for lightweight environments. And because it is so small, it can be actually run, on the mobile system, essentially. So you can bring the reasoning actually to really the forward, I would say, edge. The other thing is that the five models are, of course, available on the Azure AI Foundry and the Hugging Face. They are open weights, so you can use them. Some of them like have been optimized for local use on CPUs and GPUs across Windows 11 devices. There is a 5 Silica variant as well, which is essentially it is designed for Copilot plus PCs with the NPU optimization. And this Phi Silica variant is essentially designed to work on the Copilot plus PCs and locally. It doesn't have to actually connect with anything. It can do things locally offline mode as well. So, I think that's very helpful, particularly in the features that are coming, like, click to do or the recall, etc. on the device itself. You can do things. You don't need to actually connect it. So it can operate in the offline settings also. And these models basically have the low bit optimizations, and I would say that this really, I think, now you can see that why Microsoft is investing in small language models, because Microsoft is trying to refresh its Windows devices, right? I mean, essentially this Copilot plus PCs, uh, because they work on specific hardware, Snapdragon's hardware, NPUs, etc. These models can be embedded within the Windows itself, and it doesn't need to actually connect online.
Yeah, like I said, I do see the five models as being a great alternative to things like OpenAI O3 Mini or O4 Mini, and the ability to run these on on device is a great capability as well. So eager to start using the five models a little bit more as some alternatives to the models that are out there. Speaking of alternatives to models, this one's definitely out of the rumor mill, but it's probably not too far from the truth. So there's been some rumors floating around that Microsoft is talking with XAI for bringing Grok, or the Grok AI model, to the Foundry platform, which it's probably not that far fetched. We see things like the DeepSeek R1 model on Foundry. There's plenty of different models provided through Hugging Face. So this could be just seen as just bringing just yet another model to the Microsoft AI Foundry platform. But there's other things obviously back here. And if you remember the backstory on where OpenAI was founded, that Elon Musk was part of that initial group of people alongside of Sam. But they had their differences on where the company, that being OpenAI, should go. So, when you look at Microsoft, its premier partner for AI is OpenAI. And if Grok comes on through XAI, through Elon Musk, will that throw a even more of a a divide between Microsoft and OpenAI. Who knows? But I don't look at it that way. I just look at it as, hey, let's have more choice in terms of what models could be run or can be run on the Foundry platform.
Yeah, I feel a little bit for OpenAI because they are restricted to Azure. Although they can, um, but Azure is not restricted to OpenAI, right? So sometimes it could be a little bit unfair advantage there. But of course, that is how the agreements work. But then OpenAI is also not simply restricted to Azure because they also provide the APIs directly as well. So, anybody who is working in AWS or GCP applications can simply call those APIs. So it's not like a huge restriction. And certainly the growth doesn't speak about, it doesn't show that, those restrictions really matter a lot. Okay. Right. So I think, Jimmy, I wanted to actually talk about an AI company this week, and this one is actually bit, I would say, shocking in the sense that in terms of the ambitions of that company. This company is mechanized AI, and this is actually launched by there are some famed AI researcher who actually runs a company called Epic AI. Epic AI is actually pretty well known, reputed firm. They do a lot of research. They did lots of research about what are the projections for 10 years in terms of will the computing be a restriction on developing the model in France and things like that. Are we hitting the ceiling and things like that? Right? They do all kind of research. Recently, they did a pretty good report on how much it takes to run a AI query vis-a-vis a Google search engine query, and they came up with that. Okay, things have become like cheaper. Like now, it takes 10 times less to actually run the same query than it took 2 years ago, for example. Right, so they do tremendous amount of research. A pretty well-known company, and their founder is also actually launching this company, Mechanized AI, which basically the startup goal is to full automation of all the work, essentially the full automation of all the economy. So it's not just like specific area they're talking about. They're saying that every single role, every single job can be automated, and they're certainly targeting the white collar works. And they're saying that total addressable market is basically the aggregation of all the wages that humans are currently paid. So the market potential is huge because they're saying that everything that workers in the US are paid, which is roughly about 18 trillion dollar per year, and that's our total addressable market because we will automate everything. Now, by when we will achieve that stage and what will happen, okay, if you do that, who will pay you? Because nobody has money to then actually buy any service. I don't think this aspect is really realized much, but that's the reality. And they say that not just that, for the entire world, the number is even 3 times larger, around $60 trillion per year. So we will automate entire economy. And this is basically, this is a company that this is the founder is Tamay Basiroglu, and it is backed by a lot of people like Nat Friedman and Daniel Gross and Dwarkesh Patel, the famous podcaster, and Jeff Dean, and a lot of famous people who are involved in that one. But it's pretty audacious ambition, Jamie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah. I know it's just absurd enough to even comment on it. So probably, and maybe the timeline is probably 200 years out. Who knows? Um, this week also actually we got some work trend index report. In fact, I think it came out last week, and this is actually a report that Microsoft publishes every year. This is based on the survey of like 31,000 people across 31 countries, and they analyze basically how people are using things, what they are doing in the corporate setting. They analyze the labor hiring trends, and they study basically Microsoft 365 productivity patterns globally, and then they interview a lot of people and the companies and the economists, etc., and to identify the trends, right? So I want to quickly talk about what they have come out with and some of the, like some amazing insights. So they're talking about something called the frontier firm. Okay. And they're saying that there is an emergence of the frontier firm. First of all, the pattern to that is basically you can buy the intelligence on tap. Intelligence is going to be abundant, it will be unlimited, because you're not going to be limited to just the head count. Because what will happen is basically the agentic AI is going to enable the organization so that it can do things, and you will have so many agents doing things that you're not just limited to the number of people in your team. Essentially everything that you keep automating, or you put that into agents, and there are people and agents working together, the intelligence will be abundant, and that's what they're calling the intelligence on tap. You can consume as much as you need to, want to, etc., and make use of that. So that's one of the characteristic of that emerging frontier form. Basically no limits. The other thing is that the human agent team will basically be totally appended, right? The restructuring, or the org structure, you can say it will look pretty different. So what will happen is basically that like 46% of leaders, they say that their organization is already using agents to fully automate work streams or the business process. And which means that basically there are humans and agents are actually working together to do this kind of enablement. There is no more like rigid org charts. It's more like outcome driven work charts, right? That's what is basically emerging in the organization. So the org charts are being appended, and then basically the work charts are being created. And it's a flex structure. And the third thing is that every employee is becoming an agent boss. So what happens is that basically agent boss is someone, uh, they see it as a rise of those that kind of roles, which is basically someone who builds or delegates to or manage agents to amplify their impact and take control of their career in the age of AI. So it will be a career accelerator. People will use these agents to essentially amplify their impact and get their visibility, things like that. They will behave in a certain entrepreneurial and leadership way in the organization. So it's kind of a new kind of the personas or the leadership type that will be emerging. There are many other insights, like you can see some of those here. Like phase one is basically human plus assistant. That's phase two is basically human led agent, and the phase three is basically human led but agent operated. So there will be much more swarm of the agents. A lot of work will happen independently. Human will just set the direction and things like that. Um, let's talk about some of the other insight that, and why this is important, because what happens is that in an organization the employees are being interrupted every 2 minutes, whether pings or emails or alerts or things like that. They really get interrupted in doing things. However, when you have this human agent kind of relationship and the work chart, etc., that interruption doesn't matter, because the agents will continue to do things. So not everything will get disrupted in that way. So that's another characteristic of these firms. um, the other important insight from the report is that last year, when they did the report, the employees were more eager than the leaders themselves to use AI, to use the AI for their career, to learn AI, to put that to the use, and things like that. Now, this year, the leaders are leading the charge. The leaders are more enthusiastic and ambitious and optimistic about AI than the employees themselves. It's not that the employees have become disenchanted, but the leaders have taken a lead, and now they are actually essentially leading the charge. So that's another thing. And when you do all of this, the frontier firm, that emergence of that we talked about, people report that the basically they're thriving more in the frontier firm than actually the firm which is not into that mode yet, right? So agents are like basically creating that kind of efficiency and effectiveness that people are happy doing things. And to be honest, right, I mean, there are many things that has changed our life, right? The way we work it. Like for example, Jamie, I don't know, but who misses taking notes from the meeting, right? After the co-pilot came, like as long as we have the flexibility to use that co-pilot, we are not taking notes. We are basically focusing on the conversations. I don't like, except like something very, very specific, I will note down. But otherwise, I'm relying on AI generated notes, etc., things like that. So, it's changing the behavior, how we behave in the corporate setting as well. The other thing is, these are the areas where the accelerated AI investment is going. And these top three areas where there will be a lot of AI investment happening in the next 6 to 12 months is basically product development, customer service, and marketing. And you can see other functional areas. Operations is probably at the end, which is a bit surprising to me, because generally it's easier to actually automate that one compared to product development. But here it is. This is the insight that came out of the survey. The other Some of the other important insights from the report is basically why the employees are turning to the AI. And this is basically about, first of all, the 24/7 availability. That 22% reason why people are choosing this, because it's just available all the time, no burnout, no restriction, things like that. The other thing is machine speed and quality, and then finally the endless stream of ideas on demand. These are the top three reasons that people are using it. um, they also actually talked about essentially, there is a skilling and digital labor gap in the organization as well. So it's talking about how to basically the how the companies are uh, prioritizing the AI specific skilling of the existing workforce. And however, there are some companies, of course, they are using AI to reduce headcount, for example, right? You can see that about 33%. But most of the companies are actually trying to make sure that their existing workforce is actually learning the AI, and they are trying to maintain the headcount but using AI as digital labor. And that is in line with a lot of AI first memo that we have seen, where companies are not necessarily reducing the workforce, but they're saying that, okay, let's use the AI first strategy, where every new headcount, however, has to go through a review that why it cannot be done using AI. Why and they're saying that we will phase out the contractors over the next 2 years. For example, like recently, the AI first memo came from Duolingo, but we have seen the similar one from Shopify and Fiverr and other organizations as well. So that's pretty much in line that companies are trying to find a balance where they're not like just being too greedy. However, there are enough companies who are trying to actually look to reduce the cost by using the AI as well. Um, and the other thing is that the other trends are that there are AI startups. Of course, there are tons of AI startups popping now. So the top AI startups are actually hiring at twice the rate of big tech. In fact, there is a kind of a shift. A lot of good technical workforce is basically moving from big tech to startup and staying there, because they get a little bit more opportunity to learn things, and they're trying to also stay ahead of the curve. So that's another trend. And 78% of leaders are considering hiring for very AI specific roles. So that's a huge change. People who are not still able to figure out or not still realizing the impact of AI, they should definitely start looking for it, right? I mean, your resume, if it doesn't have any AI specific work or experience or skill, is really not going to get a call out.
Yeah,
That's
that was going to be one of the questions that I had for you. I haven't read in detail this whole report yet, but the things that you're walking through now, the thing that comes top of mind is how do you think, you know, um, the impact of this report or the findings within it are going to influence hiring and labor trends, through the coming years? What do you kind of discern out of this? And I think that's what you were just getting into.
Yeah, I mean, in summary, Jamie, the number one is, a lot of organizations are relooking at their hiring plans. Um, Particularly the AI first kind of companies, right? The companies who are AI native or digital native, etc. They are particularly reviewing their plans to even like hire, right? Do we really need to hire? Why don't you deploy an agent, right? Why don't you improve the productivity? So hiring is not, generally it used to be the top thing, right? Okay, you want to expand, you want to go into more markets, you want to expand your revenue, hiring, right? Keep hiring, and then there is a attrition, so you just keep hiring. That is definitely taking an impact. Okay, the problem is that the every head count will go through the review, Why do you need this? Why can't you do with the existing? So that's one. Number of positions will decrease. Number two, that there are companies who are trying to find the balance. They're saying, okay, we will keep the employees, we will try to train them, we will try to like we be a good employer and make them thrive. We are not going to reduce, but however we will let go the contracting. So the companies who rely on outsourcing and offshoring and contracting, etc., will see some churn, right? So they will see some impact, because now it's not about the head count, it's about the outcome, which agents can do. To be honest, a lot of work is many times outsourced because it's not core to the organization. It could be automated easily. And
Mm.
the third thing is that the people also, when they apply for it, they need to show the AI skills or the experience. Now, here is where the challenge is. Yesterday, I was talking to a group of people in the community that, like they want to learn AI, and some of them are, middle age and the senior age, etc., and they just don't know where to start, right? Many people don't know, and everybody's trying to figure out. They're trying to actually figure out where to start, what skill to use. And my answer to that is essentially, look, the good thing is about AI is that it's not just the coding. It's like, you can look into how you can use AI in your roles, right? In fact, this report also actually talk about some of the new jobs that are emerging, right, with as part of this AI thing. Like, for example, AI trainers. There are agent and data specialists, which are actually also emerging as new kind of roles where companies want to deploy agent, but somebody has to like design them, build them, things like that. So that's kind of new role. There is an ROI analyst, because of course all these investments need to be need to be justified based on the ROI, and somebody has to calculate. So there is a lot of ROI calculation that are happening. So there are ROI analysts who are able to understand, okay, how much to invest so that you can get the right. So there is a lot of these things happening. The traditional formulas may not apply in the AI world right now. And then finally, there are AI strategists, basically in marketing or the finance and customer support, essentially for each of the function to look at how you can use AI, right? So I think those are the new roles, kind of, Jamie, which are also emerging. So people have to look at those and see if they can transition to these kind of new roles as well in the organization.
Yeah,
Uh,
makes sense.
and the other thing is, there is also a like the junior employees probably have a little bit of an edge, because of course they will be like cheaper, sometimes they're perceived as more energy, things like that. They will be trusted more. The leaders, 83% of leaders believe that AI will let junior employees do strategic work sooner. And as an example, it gave an example of a company who did not actually the fill in the position of a CMO, chief marketing officer, who left. Rather, it actually gave a junior employee, a much junior employee, a charge to actually design the campaign, run the campaign, things like that. Basically, the work that CMO was doing, and that junior employee with all these AI enablement, etc., is able to actually do the job. So they are totally, probably they will just forego that role entirely, right? So there will be a lot more empowerment at the junior level, and maybe the senior level may not be required anymore.
Yeah, be curious to see what impact that has on salaries. In that one simple example, did that junior person then get the salary of the CMO? Probably not. So will the rise of use of agents to take the place of some workers? What impact will that have on overall salaries or pay for the workforce? Yet to be seen. Obviously, I know you don't have the answer to that. Neither do I. But it will be interesting nonetheless to see. I guess one last question for you is, around this is how do you, what advice would you give employees on how to adapt to the changes that are predicted within this report?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, Jamie. The thing is that um, there are recommendations. That's what Microsoft is also running. There are some resources available in terms of like AI skilling, etc. The important thing is that you don't have to completely change your roles, right? Look at what part of your job or the role that can be very easily automated. Okay. And in fact, you look at this report, you will see that, okay, these are the kind of skills that they have identified in this survey that okay, these are the skills that these are human strengths, right? So look at those kind of skills which are human strengths, something like conflict mitigation, adaptability, process optimization, innovative thinking. These are like human strength, and AI literacy is really AI capability. So like essentially learning about the AI and things like that. So these are the top 5 skills that basically are, like people are should be focusing on and identifying that okay, how they can use this to be relevant. That's one part of it. The other
Yeah.
thing I would say is that also that there is a lot of business knowledge, functional knowledge, industry knowledge that is still very relevant, right? To be able to even do the setup for the agent, things like that. Agents don't look at the big picture. Agents are task oriented, right? It's not like AGI we're talking about right now. We are talking about the agents which are going to do the task by task, but you need to be able to design that entire workflow we talked about, for example, work structure, the overall system, and the different agents, etc., based on the business knowledge and the business goal. The compliance requirement may change, business environment may change. Humans still have to do that part. So make sure that people are actually keeping that kind of knowledge in the mind, because that is where again you can differentiate vis-a-vis simply an agent.
Yeah, and I think you hit it and nailed it. It's for anybody that's listening to this now. Obviously, you're a little bit ahead of the curve on people understanding AI, but I think anybody and everybody should just have a focus on continuous learning, being able to embrace new technology or skills, and also develop skills that are going to complement the things that you need to do or want to do in your job. And as you already said, staying adaptable, being proactive in the things that are going to be key to thriving in a world where AI is enhancing the work environment.
True. It will be interesting times, Jamie,
Yes,
and we'll see. Wish everybody a good 2025. Just make sure that at the end things work out. Just keep thinking what you can do, and leave in comments, right? If there are some very specific questions or the question that bother you about your career prospect, leave in the comments so that we can address those specifically, if you're listening.
sounds good. All right.
Okay.
Thanks,
Great.
everybody.
Thanks, Jimmy. Bye. Bye, everyone. Talk soon.
Have a good one.